Welcome back to BIMteriors. I'm Zach, and this is your channel dedicated to the Revit content you need. And today's topic, we're going to talk about how to Revitize your CAD details. So just a few weeks ago, I sat in on a seminar on someone that was kind of talking about how they went and their processes of utilizing some of their existing CAD details and bringing them into Revit. So as we transition into this Revit world, so many of us want to forget about CAD and only focus purely on Revit. However, in that perfect world, it doesn't exist because when push comes to shove, project timeline comes in, and sometimes we're forced to use workflows that we don't necessarily want and are not necessarily the greatest. However, we've built up such a robust library of details and project references from decades of working in CAD, and those can still be utilized. However, today's video is going to really showcase the proper workflows to getting those existing CAD details into Revit properly. Okay, so we are potentially have now found the detail we want, if that's a detail in a previous project or template. And the one thing to keep in mind before we start to bring it into Revit is think about we don't want to necessarily bring, if there's multiple details and views on that sheet, we don't want to bring all of that to Revit because with our workflows, it's just going to cause way more chaos than we need. So what I would recommend is selecting that detail, creating a new CAD file / tab, and bringing that detail to look something like this. It's really the detail itself, any annotation, any dims, whatever it is, clean it up in CAD first. So then when we go to our next step right about now, we're going to jump into Revit with the proper workflows to start Revitizing your existing CAD details. So at this point, you have found your detail, you've cleaned it up, and you're ready to start to bring it into Revit and start Revitizing your existing CAD details. Now, the most important step right now is to not do this in your active project. So create a new file that you're going to do this in because, again, this is the part of Revitizing it properly. And if we didn't do it this step, when you do bring it into your active project, you explode it, you start to Revitize it, meaning that you're starting to change the layers from CAD and creating actual object styles and Revitizing it and using Revit objects and layers. You're going to start to pollute your drawings. And this is every detail that you bring in, the more you're going to start to pollute it with annotations, dims, layers that you're not going to want to do. So the great thing about creating a separate file, we'll call it that washer file, is that you can explode it, create a mess in it, and really as you're cleaning it up, start to Revitize it. So in this way here, when you do copy this detail, this drafting view over to your project, it's all in Revit layers and not all of the CAD junk that you just exploded and brought into this project. So step one is first making sure that you're going to a drafting view. So in the top of your ribbon under view, go to drafting view, select on that. This is where I would say, give it a name. In this case here, I'm just going to call this test A. And depending on your scale, so maybe this is a 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 5. Really, this can be changed at any point. So if by accident you chose the wrong scale, this can be altered at any time. So I'm going to hit OK. So now I've created a drafting view. I'm ready to bring in this existing CAD detail that we have because now, again, we don't have to draw from scratch. We can actually grab this, start to explode it, and then just start to Revitize it. So in this way here, it's Revit objects within Revit and in project. So I'm going to come to the Insert tab because we're going to start to want to bring in that CAD detail. And there's two options. One, bringing in CAD. We have Link CAD and Import CAD. And what you're going to want to do for this exercise is you're going to want to always import CAD because it's going to give us the ability to explode. So in this way here, we can start to Revitize it. So getting rid of those existing CAD elements and bringing them into Revit. Now, once you've found wherever you save this file to, the biggest thing is making sure that I always like to keep my colors preserved. So as I'm transitioning, as I'm going from CAD to Revit elements, I can visually see that, and I'm going to hit open. So right here, we've got our detail first things first is you're going to want to unpin it. And then once I have it, you can see that it kind of acts just like a group. We want to explode this because right now we really don't have, if I just go like this is not how we want it to look like. We want to actually play around and manipulate maybe the line weight, the lines, the annotation, the dims. We want to start to control that and start to standardize it with the rest of our details in our project. So once you have this selected, you're going to now be brought into a modify option bar. And this is where the explode command is. And when you drop down this tool, there's an option to partial or full explode. Partial will just start to break it down piece by piece, but not necessarily break everything down. And at the end of the day, you're going to eventually have to break it all down. So full explode is typically the best option. Now, when doing that, you can see now you have the opportunity to start to clean this up. So right now, what you can do is use the filter tool. So I can start to filter this out and use the filter tool, and I can see that there are different lines. And with these different lines come different line weights, different properties. So I can actually start to select all this. So say if I said check none, and I'm going to say potentially it's my text notes, and I go, okay, you can see now I've just selected text. So the filter tool, super handy when doing all of this. So in this way here, you don't have to go line by line and try to figure out what it is. You can filter it out. So if you know that detail line 1 is just a 1 or a 2 or whatever your naming convention is in your project, you're able to now create that and change that over to your studio standards. When I do select this, you can see here in my properties, it's text, test. This is where you can start to drop it down and actually go to your standards. So maybe your standards is 2.5 Arial. So you can see now that's getting to your standard text. Again, there's still some work of having to pull apart these to kind of get these back to where you want. You might have to move around depending on the scale. So I'm just going to move a few things around. So in this way here, again, you can see sometimes it doesn't always copy over properly depending on how it was created in CAD. But that's just stuff you can play around with as you start to get further into these details. So you can kind of see here, like that didn't align properly, but just like that fixes it. Now you'll still have to go through and delete certain elements. So if I grab elements such as this, I know that this is a detail line text 1. What you can do is multiple things. You can use the filter tool, or you can say select all instances, visible in view, and then you can just delete it. And same with these arrows, because within Revit, the text actually have the ability to create a leader from, and that's what I would recommend then using these. So I'm going to say select all instances, visible in view, and delete them. So this is where you can then come create your arrows depending on your standard, and then just start to kind of redo and revise the temp or your detail like this. So as you start to kind of go through here, I can see, well, there's some hatches. So again, maybe I'm going to drop this down to whatever hatches that you have within your studio template. And maybe this is a diagonal up. So I'm going to make sure that we start to Revitize this. So as I start to clean this up, we're going to get closer and closer to what your details should look like in your studio. Now, what I have done is I have hit fast forward, so you didn't have to watch me slowly go through kind of changing our annotation, changing our light, our line types, our hatches, our dims, anything from that detail, and starting to Revitize it. So getting rid of those CAD elements and starting to introduce it to make sure that we're only using Revit elements, and specifically Revit elements that are typically in our templates. So in this way here, when we do copy this over and we go to copy it into our project, we're actually bringing all of the same elements. So in this way here, we're not polluting all of our drawings with all of this excess. It could be annotation lines, it could be text, dim styles. And again, this is one detail, and you would bring all of this garbage into your project, and imagine you start doing this over and over and over and over, and it's just going to be very confusing. So if I were to select this and drop this down, you can see that it brought down some of these. Again, this is some of the text from this CAD CAD file, but that's one detail. So you start to add all of this up, it's going to start to pollute your project. So this workflow of creating this washer file allows you to explode it, clean it up to your Revit standards, and then from there, bring it into your project. So usually what I like to do first thing before I bring it in is select up all these lines, this detail, filter, and then check everything I've selected, making sure that it is only Revit elements that I have selected. Now, if not, that's where you can kind of go and filter through, check what it is, and change it over to Revit elements rather than CAD. At that point here, you're now ready to copy this over to your clipboard, go back to your project and insert it. So in this way here, you're only inserting Revit elements and not CAD. And this is the best way to Revitize your existing CAD details. That is a wrap on this week's video of how to Revitize your existing CAD details. So as you're transitioning into Revit, as timelines get tighter and tighter and tighter, and again, remember, you have such a great library of existing CAD details, and those don't necessarily have to be drawn from scratch. So as we transition, as we start to build our Revit libraries, in the meantime, this workflow will help you better clean those details up and bringing them into your Revit project the proper way.